Indian civilization and Islamic civilization, the peoples ultimately responsible for producing them had close cultural coherencies. In fact, he's even more direct. Said the pre-Aryan cultural forces of black Dravidians that Brother Baba Ranoko documents for us in his wonderful work. The pre-Aryan cultural forces and the Islamic culture are heirs of the same cultural background, like two cousins of the same family who have since long forgotten that they are of common descent. Did y'all catch that?
Yes, sir.
For me, this insight is of critical importance. What is Baron Umar saying? What did his social anthropological studies lead him to believe? That the Arabs responsible for the rise of Islam and Islamic civilization and the pre-Aryan Dravidian, he identifies correctly identifies the pre-Aryan agents of culture and civilization of ancient India as Dravidian, that these two cultures were cousins, and that the culture, the civilization of ancient India, created by the black Dravidians and Austro-Asiatics, likewise black, that civilization and that culture is similar to, is related to the civilization created by those Arabians. The Islamic civilization and ancient Indic civilization are heirs to the same cultural background. Now that's a critical insight that has implications on a number of levels. What you should be aware of, what we should be aware of, this insight was articulated in 1939. And it's just a wonderful thing to live and do scholarship in 2012.
Yes, sir.
It is as if, Brother Ranoko, the ancestors designated this day to break the seventh seal, if you will. Because there's so much data out there. So much is brought to the surface. So much information is now available to firmly, forcefully confirm brilliant insights of the past and kick to the king erroneous but very influential claims and conclusions of the past. In this particular case, the Baron's insight has been confirmed. One, Henry Field, biological anthropologist from the University of Chicago, after whom the famous Field Museum of the University of Chicago is named. He specialized, he paid particular attention to the ethnography of the East, in particular, Arabia. And Field suggested in 1956 that the Arabian Peninsula was occupied initially by people intermediate to the Somalis on the one hand of East Africa and the Dravidian peoples of India on the other. That the East African Somalis and the Dravidians of India, that the original population of Arabia was a population intermediate, not just geographically, but ethnically intermediate between the two populations. And he suggested that Dravidian, here's a Dravidian, and Arab has in them an inheritance from a common stock. the Dravidians of India and the original Black Arabians, that the two have an inheritance from a common stock. They originated from a common stock. Or as the Baron said, they're cousins. Not just culturally, but ethnically, they are related peoples. An inheritance which has been retained more completely by the natives of India than by the Arab people. Why? Because the Arab people have been mixed up. The Arabs that we take to be Arabs, those white-looking Arabs, Kenya Abdullah,
Right.
from Saudi Arabia, that's not an Arab. He's part of the reason Phil would have to submit that common inheritance, that common ancestry between the original Arabians and the Dravidians, that common ancestry is more visible with the Dravidians than with the Arabs, because the Arabs have been mixed up and messed up more than Dravidians, and there's more people masquerading as Arabs. See, the Hindu Brahmins in India did a job. No one wants to feign being a Sudra, right? If you're not born a Sudra, you're not going to claim to be a Sudra. You're not going to want to make people in India think you're of the Sudra class if you're not. You may want to do your best to make people not know you're a Sudra. You know, we call it self-hatred. Here in America, the tragic fruit of the lie of white supremacy and black inferiority. And nobody does that lie better than the Hindus of India.
That's right.
The Dutch in South Africa doesn't do the lie of white supremacy and black inferiority with all of its tyranny the way the Hindus do. But the irony is, most of those Hindus are brown skinned. You think they're people of color. On sight, you'll think they're people of color. That phenomenon I won't get to today was a very interesting phenomenon of how that can be. How some of the most tyrannical anti-black people, you gotta look real hard to assume they not black themselves.
That's right.
Very interesting phenomenon. Another subject for another time. But the Dravidians of India and those original Arabians, they are ethnically derived from a common stock. Now that was 1956, the field of social anthropology. It would be imprudent and bad methodology if our evidence relies on data available only up to 1956. That's bad methodology. And this is why, family, I love Black Men of the Nile by Dr. Yusuf bin Yahya. Even more so do I love Civilization and Barbarism by the great Sheikh Anta Diop. But trust and believe. When was Black Men of the Nile published?
1972.
1972.
1970.
See, Barbarism and Civilization in its English was published in 1992. Those are great works, but trust and believe. I will use them, I have used them, and I will continue to use them, but trust and believe that they will be put in conversation with 2012 data. And when that is done, that means some of what is in that 1972 publication, as great as it was in its day, and as great as it is today, some of what is in that 1992 publication, as great as it was in its day, and as great as it is today, some of it will be rendered null and void. I say that because some of us.
I have a quick announcement. Does anybody have a Camry, a burgundy Camry, with license plate 2042? We would need for you to move it. It's about to get towed. Nobody has a Camry?
Just directly in front of us.
Directly in front of the MARTA?
From the MARTA.
Oh, I got green camera.
Yes.
Is it green, BUR? Okay, I thought that meant burgundy. It's in front of the MARTA City Zero. I apologize. No, that's important.
So the point is, see, that's bad methodology.
Yes, sir.
To rely on old sources and not put them in conversation with modern data. Using old sources is not a problem in and of itself. Not putting them in conversation with current data is a problem, and bad methodology. So had I stopped at 1956, you could question all my preaching on sound methodology. The beauty is we live in this day and time. And an important article was published March 19, 2007 in Newsweek. It summarized the results up to that point of not just archaeology, but the genetic sciences that have contributed to an understanding of human origins and human migrations. The good thing about what they call archaeogenetics, the good thing about this article is, in terms of the biological sciences, it did not just use a mitochondrial DNA study, use a Y chromosome study. See, that's important. Most of you are probably familiar with the mitochondrial DNA studies. You know, the African Eve. Most humans, mitochondrial DNA is that found only in women. And so the maternal line of humanity can be traced through mitochondrial DNA. And by doing such studies, we've been able to identify the maternal ancestor of modern human beings on the planet today. But some of us got crazy and thought, well, that meant the origin of modern humanity was simply a woman. You know, they didn't even think that she had a mate. That her and him is the reason that there's descendants whose lineage can be traced through mitochondrial DNA. The other study, the Y chromosome study, traces the paternal lineage of humanity. And these genetic studies allow us to map the migrations of humanity. And so this particular article summarized the archaeological and the genetic, both mitochondrial and Y chromosome studies. And I'm not going to, and they were able to map when the out of Africa migrations, when human populations emerged from Africa, where they went, when they went. I'm not going to go through the whole map, but relevant to our discussion, we learned that, one, Africa, in many ways, is the womb of humanity.
Absolutely.
Arabia, we now know, is the cradle of humanity. Yeah. The